Hey, thanks for dropping by to the Planners on Purpose podcast, created by Naomi Tucker, CMP. Now, this space is for the event planners to encourage and empower you so that you can fully live your life on purpose. So before we dig in, please take a moment to subscribe so you get future shows. Now, here she comes, your host, Naomi.
Hi everyone, glad to have you here with me today wherever you're listening. Today we're going to be talking about being an inclusive ally for your client, and my guest for this episode is Brittny Drye. Brittny has been an activist for inclusivity and is going to give us some insight as to how we can do better as an industry and become more welcoming for all of our clients and partners. But before we do that, I wanted to introduce myself for those of you that are new to me. Hi again, I'm Naomi Tucker, event professional turned high performance coach, helping you through the big stuff like burnout, overwhelm, and advancing your career as a meeting and event professional. I intentionally work with ambitious leaders in the event planning space to build time-saving and leadership strategies so that you can manage your many commitments and love the lives you lead. I empower you to be a planner on purpose. To live on purpose means to intentionally develop self-mastery, to be confident in the vision and goals you have set for your life, and to be a force and moving forward to keep it. That is a planner on purpose. Now, this podcast is all about highlighting the intentional steps we take in our lives, stories from other event professionals, and it will give some strategies to really help you on your self-discovery journey. A little bit of everything. I'm excited that you're here, so welcome. Now, let's get to our episode today. As I mentioned, we are going to be talking about being an inclusive ally for your client. And that means coming alongside your client to help them deliver the best experience for their event ever, being their advocate and planning with highest intention. Brittny will help us to have this conversation, and hopefully you'll be able to take one thing away that you can do to make your client's planning experience a better one. So let's get to it. Hello. Well, today I get the opportunity to speak with Brittny Drye about being an inclusive ally for your client. So this is an important conversation, and I'm excited to speak with her. And it's a conversation we need to have in the wedding and the event planning spaces. So Brittny, thank you so much for being here on the podcast, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, Naomi. Thank you so much for having me. This is definitely a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too. So before we hop in and just talk all about inclusivity, because there's a lot to unpack there, I would love to talk a little bit about you. You've been a champion for inclusivity for much of your career, it looks like. So I would love the listeners to know a little bit about you, your journey, and just how your passion for this came to be.
Yeah. So I started Love Inc. back in 2013, and I kind of came about. So I've always been an editor and a writer for magazines, for online media, blogs. And I was freelancing at the time. And for many of my freelance clients were wedding blogs. So I kind of dipped my toe in the wedding space that way. And while doing so, I really realized there was this huge void for like a truly inclusive publication. All the media out there was either talking to a hetero couple, bride and groom, or it was exclusively for LGBTQ+. And for me, I felt like, well, when you separate it, it implies that it's different, which, kind of goes against what we would consider equality. So I wanted to create a platform where, all genders, all orientations, all identities were celebrated and just like very like organically included. So that's how Love Inc. was born, was creating that space for that. And so we've, I was hoping by now it'd be a moot point, but unfortunately we're still fighting the fight for inclusivity in the wedding space and of course in our world. And yeah, still at it. So we've grown from, a blog. We started with a digital publication. We are now a print publication. We have a podcast for couples called Inclusively Yours, and, just kind of doing all the things.
That's amazing. That's great. And it's great that you've been able to build it to what it is today. And I think that it's much needed for sure, especially representation matters, right? And I think on both sides of that. And I would love to just talk about inclusivity in particular and unpack that a bit and what it actually means. Because I have found in the industry, there are some that just still don't really know like what that actually means and what it means for them and how they should pay attention to it. So can you help us unpack inclusivity?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack, and I know
Right.
we're going to dive into it deeper today, but, kind of at its surface, being truly inclusive, it's a mindset. It's how you are, it's who you are, it's how you run your business, it's your brand. It's the language you use, the imagery you show, the way you train your staff, your vendor relationships and your referrals and the nonprofits you support. It's all of these different facets of your being and your business and your brand. And it has to be all the time, year round, totally authentically, genuinely you.
Mhm.
And I think that's where some people falter is they go in waves.
Mhm.
We saw in 2020, like all the media was like, Black Lives Matter, and here's photos of Black couples. And in June, we see it with LGBTQ plus, and then it fizzles out. And it's so important if you are to be inclusive, it should just be ingrained into your brand. It's just very organically ingrained. It's not something that's seasonal.
Mhm.
So at its core, that's what inclusivity is. And of course, there's, more to it than that, but
Mhm. There's so much in that. I think just because there's so many, I guess, many people that do not feel like they're represented depending on background, age, religion. And I feel like so many people struggle to have their brand represent that inclusivity, but then also still represent who they're trying to target. It's definitely a delicate balance, wouldn't you think?
I think so. And I think for wedding pros, they're scared. They don't want to do the wrong thing. They don't want to say the wrong thing. So it's about, educating yourself and really getting a good handle of the right way to do it and to do it in an authentic manner.
Well, tell us a little bit about that. I would love to just unpack a little bit, some tips on how one could show that. And you did give some examples as far as imagery, and as far as the things that people say to encourage and inspire that inclusivity. I would love to just hear a little bit more from you, what you feel are, let's say, the top tips for people to use to just help them to do what they should be doing in terms of inclusivity and including everyone.
Yeah. Well, LGBTQ plus inclusivity is kind of where my expertise lies.
Mm-hmm.
And, so speaking to that, the language that you use plays a huge role.
Mm-hmm.
Your website is the first stop for a couple majority of the time. And so if you're speaking to a bride on your website and you're only featuring hetero couples, if on your inquiry form, it has Mr. and Mrs., all of those things can be so easily fixed and switched for gender neutral terms that, it may not seem like a big deal to you, but it plays a role for those that are not seeing themselves represented in your language and in your imagery. Just swapping out for gender neutral terms like couple or soonly-weds, partners, wedding party instead of bridal party. If you're a venue or a coordinator at a venue, use the term wedding suite instead of bridal suite. And all those, they're very easy to change. You just have to kind of retrain your brain. I know these terms have been used for years and years and years in the wedding space. But this is how it is now. And I think it's really important to use inclusive language, when you're working with, all the time. And especially when you are working with LGBTQ plus couples, because it makes a difference when it's two grooms doing a venue tour and you're like, here's the bridal suite, like that. How do you think that's going to make them feel? So,
and I'm wondering, and I know you have a certain specialty, but I think that could possibly be applied towards all people, right?
Mm-hmm. There's so many weddings themselves. They're built on like this cookie cutter formula, right? They're built on these traditions, these usually like very gendered traditions. And I think for any couple, no matter, whether your orientation or identity or race, whatever it may be, any couple is going to appreciate having a planner like come to them and ask them what they want. Mm-hmm. Couples are doing weddings the way they want to do them. And so when you are working with a client, it's so important to ask those questions around them and not like this cookie cutter formula that so many planners have been trained to do their work in. So for example, instead of saying like to the bride, like, oh, so who are you going to walk down the aisle with? Like making the assumption that the bride is walking down the aisle with a parent before her partner does. Instead of wording it that way, word it in a way of, how do you envision your processional, so that it's open-ended and it allows the client to tell you what they want and what they envision. And that goes across the board with any couple that you're working with, kind of keeping it open-ended and not projecting these assumptions onto them, and that's the beauty of weddings right now. Everyone is creating a wedding that fits them, that suits them. And so planners just need to keep that in mind. I know so many have been like trained to think in a certain way. Their questionnaires are the ones that they've been using for years and years. And so it's really, now's a good time to just like dig into that and, try and step outside that box and see, okay, how are these questions going to be perceived? What am I looking for in an answer for this? And keep it open-ended so that the couple can tell you what they want versus you projecting these assumptions and stereotypical rules to them.
Yeah, I like that. I like the fact that even with the inquiry forms or whatever forms people have to fill out for their business, just keeping it open for them to basically let you know. That definitely is I think it's a great way on either side to be able to collect the information, and then you do exactly what you need to do, which is, plan
right.
that particular event for them based off of what their needs are. So, in assumptions, definitely it's easy, right, to make assumptions, but I believe we're just now in a world where we don't want to make those assumptions because they could have really dire consequences. So can you just give us some examples of like perhaps mistakes how do we get out of those type of mistakes if we make them? Because I know, I probably have made those mistakes. Others probably have made mistakes of assuming something that they shouldn't have. And how can we kind of circle back and say, just make it a little bit right and make them feel
Naomi,
better?
that is such a great question, because I think that is what scares so many professionals, is they don't want to make mistakes. So, when you make a mistake, so whether you misgender somebody or make an assumption about a tradition, whatever it may be, apologize and move on. Don't make it a thing, because the second you make it a whole thing, now you're making it about you and your discomfort. And now you're making that person have to coddle you. Oh, don't worry, it's fine. Like now you're making them like have to react to you and maybe make them have to feel like they have to educate you and make them feel you don't want to put them in any position that makes them uncomfortable. It's not about you and your discomfort. Apologize, move on. You own up to it, apologize, move on, and learn from it, and just make sure it doesn't happen again. we're human, right? Like it can happen. And people know that, clients know that, they know you're human. Right. So as long as you don't make it a whole thing and make them uncomfortable, and now they have to like make you feel better. Like, oh, it's fine. Don't worry. No, it's okay. You don't want to do that. So I think that's the best, acknowledge and move on. Yeah.
Yeah. So what other area, I guess, of the planning process, we talked a bit about receiving those inquiries and making it a little bit more open for someone to really tell you what their vision is for, their wedding. What about later on, right? When we are kind of in the mix of planning, are there any, I guess, hot struggles that happen at that point that you could bring up as examples to kind of give us some insight into how we can do better when it comes to inclusivity?
Yeah, well, planners especially, like you're the gatekeeper, right? You are the barrier between your clients and the rest of the vendor team. So that's a huge responsibility, especially when you are working with couples and clients who may be discriminated against for who they are, who they love, or what culture they're coming from. And you want to make sure that you are doing your homework, because heaven forbid, you don't do your job and they're going on a venue tour and the venue manager says bridal suite, like I mentioned before, with 2 grooms, or they, they refuse to work with a couple. You do not want that to happen. So you want to make sure you do your homework. I always recommend, don't even make it have a client to do the homework. Go through your list now. Go through your vendor list, your vendor recommendations, your vendor partners. Make sure they're inclusive. Have those conversations now. Don't let having a minority client be the reason that you do this homework, because you should be working exclusively with vendor partners who are inclusive, who are open to working with all couples. So you should already have your list, but if you don't, make sure you're doing that homework before you present them to the client, because you never want to put your clients in a position where they're discriminated against, or they feel uncomfortable, or any of that. You don't want them to have that negative feeling, because it's going to be your fault, along with, whatever vendor they're discussing things with. So that is, as a planner, that is like first and foremost, vouching for any vendor recommendations that you're sending their way, and ensuring that those vendors are equality minded.
That's a very great point. And I don't think that everyone recognizes that your venue could play a huge role into success when it comes to inclusivity and making sure that everyone is feeling welcome and they're having a really great experience across the board. That's definitely a very good idea. So thank you so much for that.
Even for hetero couples, because like catering, for instance, like hetero couples, is the catering team, is their staff trained on inclusivity? Because when they put down the plate for a guest, are they going to assume Mr. or Mrs.? Because you might have non-binary guests. And so hetero couples are even looking to ensure that the vendors they work with have been trained on inclusivity, because they want to make sure their guests have a positive experience. So, not even just for the couple, but it extends to their guest experience as well. The having inclusivity as a priority of all vendors and their staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it extends, and, even their perceptions and what they're saying and how they're treating others that are not just the couple, but also the party and their guests. It's very important that they have that sense of inclusivity. So definitely a very good point. Let's talk about the fact that, hey, there are these situations where we might work with vendors, or we might work with venues that perhaps may discriminate towards those who we are working for, how would a planner then speak up for their client if they're being discriminated against, or is it even their role to do so? And where is that line drawn?
It's absolutely their role, and it's absolutely important to speak up. That kind of goes hand in hand with being inclusive is speaking up and having, speaking out against discrimination, because that's the only way change is made is when people speak up. So it's absolutely a role. I would get as much in writing as possible, just in case it, escalates. Do as much of this exchange over email so that you have, written history. But yeah, I think it's definitely your role to speak up. Again, you're the gatekeeper. You have to protect your clients and stand up for them, and they are your priority. So, go to upper management, whatever you need to do, depends on the business, of course, but, definitely speak up.
And it also shows you, I guess, how supportive your organization that you work for, whether you're, a solopreneur or you're working for, a planning company that actually is doing this, making sure that you have that support behind you within your organization, and that they are champions of inclusivity too, so that they can actually come and help support, I guess, that planner in any kind of circumstance that they're working through when it comes to discrimination. So I think that's a very important point too, because it doesn't just stop at the vendors and suppliers that we work with. Sometimes we have to unpack this at our workplaces as well.
1,000%. Yeah, absolutely. And whether it's striking up a conversation for the first time or for the 100th time, like if it comes up, those conversations need to be had because there is work to do.
Mm-hmm. So what do you see the biggest challenge right now in the industry when it comes to inclusivity? I feel like there has been strides taken, like with publications like yours, and there are others, but let us know what you feel is the biggest challenge right now in the industry.
I think complacency, like I mentioned before, it comes in waves when it should just be consistent. We should always be fighting for this and speaking out for this and integrating it into our brands and in the imagery we showcase. I'm media, so I'll speak to media, but like 2020, like we saw all this media make these proclamations, and here we are 2 years later, and I'm seeing that not happening still. They've gone back to how it was.
Why do you think that is?
And conferences, they promise to have, diverse speakers and do it in locations, have their conferences in locations that doesn't discriminate against, LGBTQ plus people, but they have conferences in countries. Now they're doing conferences in countries where it's illegal to be gay. So, things like that is so frustrating to me. I'll try not to get on my soapbox about it. So frustrating to me because they make all these, grand statements and then they do the opposite. And then they have entire, communities following them doing so, whether it's, media, whatever it may be. And it's so frustrating to me to see that because for a while there, I thought it felt like we were going in the right direction. And now it feels like we're taking steps backward with these efforts, at least with these larger corporations and entities. So it's frustrating. It's extremely frustrating. I won't mention any names or call anyone out, but
it definitely is. It's interesting that there hasn't been consistency there, but also you wonder you just wonder why. I mean, and there's so much to unpack because, we're talking about a lot here, but it really is interesting, like why it hasn't been continued to be championed
Because it was never genuinely done so in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
They did so so I'll just speak on Black Lives Matter. They did so in response to Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
So they felt pressure to say something. So they did for their own marketing purposes. It wasn't done so in a genuine manner.
Mm-hmm.
They did it to make themselves look good.
Mm-hmm.
And they
or
do it
now to tout, right?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Check something off the list.
You even see it when you talk about ethnicity, you see it in the current situation right now with war and everything that's going on. Not to say that everybody should definitely feel like, hey, we want to make sure that the Ukrainian people are definitely lifted up and given support, but everybody now has to make a statement about that they back this and that sort of thing. So I feel like it's the same type of response as in the past with some of these other things. But then how will it sustain itself through right now, what you would think would be more of a heavy period where everyone's kind of speaking up, they're saying something, but are they doing? What is the action behind the words?
Exactly. And I think that's where kind of we are now, is that we are now seeing that all of some of those words were empty. Because we're now, so many people they like I said, they've fallen complacent. They're just kind of coasting now. They don't feel like the need to shout it from the rooftops. They don't have that marketing pressure to showcase inclusivity. So they're just kind of going back to the way they were, instead of making those long-term changes that they need to be doing, that we as an industry need to be doing. I mean, the industry just from a foundation is just so filled with, discrimination and it's not equal. So there's a lot of work to still do. And I think as an industry whole, we need to keep speaking out about it. It should not take a movement to do so. It should just be part of who we are. Like I said, as a brand, that is inclusivity.
Oh, it's, just being, open to all and being supportive to everyone. I would think that would be the basic human right, but just carried through the business, right? So if you were to just encourage people today of one thing, just one piece of advice when it comes to how they can take that step forward in being more inclusive for their clients or even in their organizations, what would you say that would be?
I would say educate yourself. There is a lot of great workshops from seasoned professionals and seasoned educators within the wedding space and then beyond it. Educate yourself on equity and how you need to navigate your business and how you need to navigate with your clients, because education is so important, and we're not born with it, right? Especially, I mean, I'm white. Like, I acknowledge like the whole like white privilege. I know I need to actively educate myself on topics and put that work in. So it's really important to do the work and do the homework, so that you can go into it and be the best you can be for all of your clients.
Nicely said. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. I know this was it's always such a difficult thing to unpack, conversation to have, but I definitely appreciate you showing up and helping us understand a bit more. But let's hear a little bit about what's next for you, what is happening next for Brittny, and what you have on the horizon.
Yeah. So I just started recording for season 3 of our podcast, Inclusively Yours, which is for couples same content that we have on the blog and in the magazine. It's LGBTQ plus inclusive wedding planning tips and advice and inspiration. So currently recording for that, and that will be launching later this spring. And then we're working on our next issue, which is very exciting. Our next print issue, which I'm hoping will go out in October. So
nice. Well, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you just a few fun questions just to kind of,
lighten it up a little.
A few fun questions. So let me know. These are surprise questions. Brittny doesn't even know that I'm throwing them her way. So let me know when you're ready and we'll get started.
Okay. Let's go.
Okay. All right. So what is your favorite activity to do with your friends?
Favorite activity. I would say like a wine tasting situation or like wine cheese picnic.
Awesome. What is your favorite type of wine?
I go through periods. So right now I'm very much like a crisp white, like a Sancerre level wine, but I ebb and flow. Sometimes it's usually around summertime, it switches to rosé.
Sounds good. That's the best time to switch to rosé. Yeah.
Yes.
The next question is, what is a piece of advice that made the most impact on your life?
Oh my gosh, that's such a hard one. Oh gosh, Naomi. I've received like so many great pieces of advice over the years.
Whatever's top of mind.
I'm going to say like my mother's advice, always like growing up, it wasn't necessarily for business, but she was just always encouraged me to just do the best I can because everything else is out of your control. So like just put in your best effort, and it may not be the best in the room, but it's the best that you can do. So that's all that anybody can ask for, including like yourself. So I kind of have instilled that and try to keep, that's always like the little voice in the back of my head when I'm going through some rough patches, was just like, did I do the best? Yes. Okay. Well, then it is what it is.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's great. Your mother was a wise woman.
I know. So. She's awesome. I love her.
Awesome. So what travel destination is on your bucket list? Things are opening up a bit now. What is your bucket list destination?
Oh my goodness. I really want to Australia. That is,
yes.
I want to explore Australia. I'm US based, and it's a very, very, very far away, but I think it's incredible. And just, I have featured so many weddings and style shoots that took place in Australia, and it's always so amazing what the creatives do. And so I kind of like selfishly want to take like a work trip out there and just connect with a bunch of wedding pros and just do shoots and stuff and play.
That sounds very nice.
Yeah.
It's definitely a beautiful place. So yeah, I hope that happens for you.
Yeah. Well, it won't happen anytime soon.
Well, thank you again for being here. If anyone wanted to learn a bit about you or what you do, can just share with us where to find you. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. So you can find me loveinkmag.com or at loveinkmag across all social platforms.
Perfect. That's nice and easy. Thank you. And I'll make sure to link all those things into the description to those contact points. But thank you so much again, Brittny, for being a part of the Planners on Purpose podcast. It was just lovely to chat with you. So I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. What a great way to spend a Friday afternoon.
Absolutely. Take care now.
You too.
Welcome back. That was a very insightful episode from Brittny, and I'd like to thank her again for being on the Planners on Purpose podcast. And I hope you received some takeaways and insights that you can use to make your planning experience for your clients and partners a better one. So thank you so much for being here for this episode of the Planners on Purpose podcast, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. But until next time, please stay on purpose.
Well, that wraps it up for this episode. If If you enjoyed the conversation, hit the like button and tell us how much you enjoyed the show by leaving a message in the comments. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.